Welcome to my Outer Worlds 2 review. I will be doing a stream so you guys can come and ask me questions if there's anything you guys think you'd like to just have a conversation about, which will be this Friday. And we're going to go through parts of the game kind of in the order that you're going to interact with them. If you want a basic and quick response as to whether or not the game's good, I think the game is fairly good. There's a lot here to enjoy. It is very ripe for replayability and going through multiple playthroughs. You guys will see why as we progress through the video. So we'll begin with the character creator, as there's a lot here that we can talk about. Some people will like some of this and other people won't. We start with the type 1 and type 2, which is quite obviously a feminine and masculine appearance for the character. The funny part of this is that it says body type 1 and 2, but in game, the game will still refer to you as male and female. For those that care about it, it's there. That's how this works. I actually quite like the prosthetics. In particular, I had the white one on my character just because I thought it looked cool. Don't shoot the messenger. I just think that's pretty good. From there, we also have a pretty good and in-depth amount of changes that we can make to the character's face. I want to be specific about the fact that it says face. We are unable to edit the rest of the body. I don't really know why they omitted that. In terms of the actual face itself, we get loads of customization, so you can make your character pretty much look however you want. Moving on to the background then, this is how you are most going to be imagining your character. Sometimes this gives you free interactions with characters, so you'll have the occasional time where you'll be doing something and the professor thing will come up. So because you're smart, you've got experience in a lab, you'll get unique dialogue. Sometimes the games will actually show you times when you could have used one of the others as well, which is kind of what makes you almost get tempted to come back through with a different background. Weirdly enough, if you were trying to min-max this, you should probably have something that doesn't relate to how you want to play. The reason for that is the professor responses often come up when you also have the option to have, let me just get across to skills here, when you have the option to use science as your response. So we have all of the different skills. We'll go through these a little bit in a second. Basically, if you pick professor and they go, well, because I'm a professor, I'm going to use a lot of science as a part of my character's skills. A lot of the times when you can use the professor response, your science skill or a science related perk will also work at the same time. So whilst I don't necessarily recommend min-maxing this game, I don't think that's the kind of game this is. From a background perspective, if you were trying to min-max this, then you might go with something like, well, I'm going to pick gambler then, and I'm going to be a gambler scientist, and you'll probably make more use of your background like that. The trait system is actually very interesting. I really like the trait system. This is something that's going to get min-maxed a lot though. When I do a character creation guide, you guys are going to see me use this to my advantage, because the way the traits work is we get to pick one of these for free. Now, the most obvious one to take first is brilliant. This is going to give you an extra skill, and your skills go up very slowly in this game. At base, we get 2 points per level to put up. So as you can see, each point is actually quite valuable. So in the case of guns, it's giving you a 10% increase in damage. And when you pick this, you're going to get to put 2 free points in there. That's actually quite a strong thing to get straight away. So I do think people are going to min-max this a lot, and I'm going to show you guys why in a second. Now, we can actually pick 3 of these, but each time we pick one after the first, we have to pick a disadvantage. For example, if I wanted to take innovative, and I'm not saying I necessarily recommend this, but ammunition in the early game is very tight, and having this will help you out if you do decide to use it. You can then go ahead and pick a negative, and the easiest negative to pick is dub, which is generally what I would recommend people do. You can use something like the health threshold and the other ones, but I feel like these are going to be much more specialized once you know what you're doing with the game. Toxicity crash, basically when we heal, we have a meter that builds up, so you can't just heal forever. And once that goes up to a certain point, you'll be in a crashed state, which stops you from healing. Now, there are items and perks and stuff in the game that allow you to create a build around this. For a first timer, I would probably avoid doing that. There are, of course, a lot of other good things here. So the base crit chance, so lucky is very strong. Crit is pretty good in this game. Crouch and combat speed, also very good. Being fast would actually be a rather large advantage. One of our main negatives when we get to gameplay, so I'm going to repeat this later, is that there's no dodge, and there are a lot of enemies that do like build-ups for attacks, and they'll charge you, and there's very little room to be able to dodge. Having the additional combat speed from your sprint would probably be quite strong, especially if you're going to go with a melee character. You are obviously free to look through these, see what it is that sings to you, but I do think that If you're looking for something strong, brilliant is the immediate auto take. And then what you would probably do is pick something that's going to fit you or how you want to play. So maybe crit chance is probably one of the most basic as well, especially if you're going to go like heavy into guns. And then take dumb here, and we're going to go ahead and look at the skills. The reason that I say dumb is good, and maybe on your first playthrough this might be a little bit tight, this game works best if you target a build or character type in your head. So in your head, think about who you want to be. Do you want to be a sneaky thief? Do you want to be an engineer, a marksman, or something like this? Ultimately, a lot of the skills and the skill checks, they raise as you go through the game. So in the first area, unless you've got like 4 or 5 in, let's say, lock picking, you're not going to be able to get through every lock. You're going to get put 2 in there straight away. So by the time you're on the first map, your first level, when you've only got 2 points, you're already going to need to put points into lockpick to be able to get that to a point where it's usable and you can open everything. And that stays the same. I don't want to talk about like too many places, but once you get to the second zone, the locks have gone up to 8. Not only are you going to have to put those few in there to be able to do it in the first zone, as you're continuing to level, you're going to want to keep putting points in there, because otherwise you're going to be having to go back on yourself in the next zones. So what that means is, because we've picked dumb, we can pick 5 that we don't care about, and I think that will actually help you to target your build better and kind of stop you from getting sidetracked. I'm pretty much always going to be using a gun build, so I do not care at all about having melee. I tried putting points into observation, and basically what this does is it kind of highlights some bits around the map. It's effectively free loot, and it gives you the weak spot damage, so pretty good if you want to be getting headshots, but ultimately I didn't find it to be all that useful. The main reason for this is it's effectively giving you the same kind of loot as if you had lockpick, and I much prefer the evasion chance, even if it starts out quite low. I think observation is an easy pick for me to get rid of as well. I'm also not a huge fan of speech. There are times when it is really useful because it does in fact help you get through some interactions, but every skill actually has speech checks associated with it. So if you're talking to a doctor and you need to help them heal somebody, your medical skill is going to come into that, not your speech skill. You're actually going to end up with speech interactions being available to you anyway. Maybe this is one that you can choose to leave out. I don't plan on playing as a stealth character, so I can easily get rid of this as well. In a more patient playthrough, this might be okay as you're going around the wilderness, but I found that a lot of the time when I was like kind of just running around and I found something, I would already been seen by the enemies. So stealth was useless a lot of the time, and you can't use it in boss battles either. So it was kind of something that I just didn't really feel like I needed a lot of the time. Now that we've weeded a few out, we are getting to the point where we need to start kind of honing in where we want our build to be. Leadership, I think, might be one that you want to get rid of. The problem with the companions is they're not consistent enough at targeting enemies, in my opinion. A lot of the time, they just don't do as they're told. Now, you can take perks to make them actually target enemies that you're targeting, but they take a fair amount of investment to make them good. So this could be something that you choose to get rid of as well. But in my case, I'm going to take out explosives here, and that is going to have my build be pretty much set in for me. I'll have the options to take other things if I want them. But for me, I think you should automatically take guns at the beginning. Like I said before, ammunition is pretty tight, and having that additional damage is just better ammo economy. And then from there, because we've taken the brilliant, we get to pick 2 additional ones that we can use for our build depending on what you want to do. I think lockpicking is very good, although it doesn't really show it on here. Engineering will actually allow you to get through a surprising amount of doors. As you're going around, you're going to see doors that are broken, and engineering is what gets you through those doors. So engineering and lockpicking gets you access to lots of loot, especially in the early game, and that pretty much gives you a decent enough setup. You got some damage mitigation because we have a 2% chance of not being hit, and we have 2% extra damage reduction as well. And as we're fighting, we do extra damage and get to penetrate some of the armor. So that gives us an overview and a couple of recommendations for creating your first character. Now we can talk about character progression. With the character created, then you're obviously going to be going through the story, and I don't really want to touch on the story all that much, but we'll touch on quest progression because there is some interesting things to talk about. But here we're going to be going into character progression, and it's relatively simple. We acquire experience points, most of which are going to come from visiting new areas and completing quests. I find that defeating enemies in this game doesn't really give you tons of XP, so in general the best way to progress is to actually just progress the game, which I personally prefer. I am not really a huge huge fan of repeatedly like running around a group of enemies and farming them up and stuff. So it's nice that, you know, each enemy might give you 75 XP at most. Just approaching a new zone gives like 250, and you get thousands from the quest completions. So I quite like that. When you level up, you normally get 2 points to put into your skills, which allows you to be powering them up, as you might imagine. And then we are able to pick a perk every 2 levels. So the first time you level up from 1 to 2, you'll get to pick a perk. These are unlocked in a pretty standard way. Some of them will have precursors and they'll have skill requirements. So as you get higher level and you progress your skills, you'll find that you'll be able to get better perks, which again kind of comes back to what I was saying before, where the more you target the actual specific skills that you should be using, obviously my character's all over the place because I didn't know this, you will have a much more significant advantage because you'll be able to get the stronger perks that way. Something cool though is that as you play the game, you can acquire floors. So you can see mine here, and if I've got one that I've kind of clipped, I can't remember if I did, I'll try and flash it up as it comes up, where you can choose a permanent disadvantage for a permanent advantage just as you progress the game. There are tons of these. Obviously we weren't told what all of the different ones were or how we get them, but this one came up for me pretty early, where we can take a discount on the vendors for selling stuff for less. This is just a straight up advantage, so I took this one because that's just 5% better economy overall if you're selling stuff. And this easily distracted one I actually think is pretty good, provided you can stay in your lane with your character, because as you can see we get 1 extra skill point per level, but you are going to have to level up your lowest pre-leveled skill. So the good thing about that is it means you don't have to level up any of the zeros, but once you have put a point into a skill, you have to level up the lowest ones. So I would have probably left speech off, and I would have left observation off. Obviously I just wanted to try these out. I got this one up to like 6 on a save, so I could have saved like 4 points here and been way higher up on all of my other skills and been much more powerful for that. There are tons of these that are pretty hilarious, so these are going to make replaying the game all that much more fun, because you'll be able to significantly change how the game feels as you're going through, and there's some level of randomness to it as well, so I quite like how that works. Moving on to quest progression then, and I'm going to try to be vague. This is going to be a little bit clue-ish, so maybe you want to skip forward if you want to be completely unspoiled. The best thing about the questing is it's all completely doable in any order. What I mean by that is, one of the coolest things is if you go out and explore stuff and you find something, and then you come to a character and you have the item that would need, you can just complete quests very freely, is what I want to say. I feel like maybe this is standard fare for a lot of things, but there's no, I don't know, I've already explored down here, so some dude up here gives me a quest to get down here, and now the item's not there. That's just not how it works, okay? I had a particular one where I just thought it was really cool, where I was exploring this area and I found an item that I just didn't know what it was. It was like a gadget and it sounded like really important, so I just kept hold of it. And then when I came to this area, I was given another quest, which was an optional quest and actually had multiple ways of solving it. But because I had the item in, it was like, oh, I've got this thing here, will this help? And then bam, can finish the quest. And the game didn't even ask for the item. It was just because it was in my inventory, and I thought that was really cool and really dynamic. Of course, I don't really want to share too many details because that's too spoilery. I think stuff like that, which like, oh, that's a cool thing, I'm going to pick that up, and then it just happens to be useful for something else later on and just saves you. I feel like it makes exploration feel more worth it than it would otherwise, because ultimately, I think when you are going around, let me get somewhere where we can have a look at the landscape here. The game world looks fine enough, and you know it's very sci-fi-ish, and it fits the bill, but I don't think exploring is anything new. Now, if you want basically Fallout New Vegas in space, that's kind of where we are. I feel like they have a lot of clutter in here. We'll get into kind of complaints a little bit later on. You know, when you're spending lots of time searching for all of the items and making sure that there's nothing there, the idea that, you know, oh, I'm going to pick up a flywheel. Oh, great. There's not a lot of terribly good loot a lot of the time, in my opinion. I've not seen very many unique items. There are collectibles. A lot of the time, I feel like, you know, we're picking all this stuff up. We get some ammo, which, you know, is rewarding because I need it. Like, I'm desperate for it, really. Look how little shells I've got. But at least we are rewarded for paying attention and grabbing any unique looking items with them being relevant to quests later on. Companions in the game are fun to interact with. I feel like their combat isn't very well integrated, in my opinion, unless you start like spending levels on it, and it's just not something I want to spend levels on. They are very basic in combat. They have an ability that they will use, but they have to build it up quite slowly, and as you can see, you can get some passive abilities from them as they level up. I feel like one of the weirdest things is we have these weapon and armor slots that we can't really change out. I feel like this is something that the game is almost missing. We do get to upgrade it, so if we come over to the crafting bench here, you can see we can go to party upgrades, and every now and then you'll pick up an item which allows you to improve how their weapon functions and how their armor functions. But ultimately, it feels like there's not a lot here, and I feel like it could have done with more customization, maybe more levels. Like this weapon gets 2 tiers, and it's not like you get all of this. You get 1 item, and then you choose between the 2, and then you get another item, choose between the 2. And I couldn't help but think about how much better companions were in Mass Effect to this. I feel like I would want more here, especially as this is something that you can spend your precious character progression on. I don't feel like there's enough here, which is why I say you shouldn't really put points into leadership, because there's just not enough there for them. However, as for the characters themselves, it's the complete opposite. I actually really enjoy interacting with them. They all have their own motives, and this probably all sounds really generic, but as with Inez here, you'll progress her quest, and she has some really original stuff that just kind of goes on with her character progression as she goes through. I actually really enjoy the characters themselves, but I just feel like the actual progression of them is a little bit lackluster. It comes on to gameplay then. Platforming is pretty good. The game doesn't tell you, but there is, in fact, a double jump in the game. I'm not going to tell you any more than that. And this mostly allows you to travel quite far horizontally. So basically, if I sprint at like a ledge, I can get quite far, and we have a mantle and all this, so we are able to climb most ledges, and we can get to quite a lot of places where you wouldn't otherwise think you'd be able to get to. This is perfectly serviceable and all right, though, so no real reason to mark it down or anything. When it comes to combat, though, let me get this... Oh, I'm a little bit too high level for it. But you can see that we are quite sluggish in combat. I can't really move very far or very fast. I have no way of dodging, even if I use something like the jump. The only real way we can actually get any distance is if we sprint into a slide, and that does kind of give you a little bit of cover. Just seems a bit weird. We don't have any sound effects for it, and it just kind of seems a bit all over the place. There is also a weird mechanic with healing, where if I'm out of combat, I can press the heal button, and I'll heal just normal. But as you can see, we get that green bar there if we heal in combat, and that is going to actually just make it so that I can't heal if I fill that up. So if I was having a particularly tough fight, and I'm, I don't know, struggling to deal with these enemies that we got right here, I can't just keep healing, because that's gonna be a problem. Additionally, as you'll see here, if we use a comrade's ability on there, it doesn't really do all that much. But probably the star of the show is the gadget. You might be seeing that we have the symbol on the bottom left there, and we can actually slow time. This works a little bit like the game's version of VATS, but that is not all that it can do. If we actually look down here at the gadgets area, you can see that we actually are able to use the dematerializer. There are more as well. There's a shield, which is mega powerful. And we are, in fact, able to customize the effects of the healing as well. So this is all stuff that we get to unlock as we go through the game. Obviously, this is just on early game character right now, because I don't want to get too far in or spoil anything. The actual gadget system is pretty good, and is what makes using a science build seem really cool, because you'll have more energy to play with, which is just extremely useful. Food and drinks are in the game, but they don't serve much of a purpose, being as all they do is they restore a small amount of health when you consume them. This is kind of boring to me, because we can easily heal out of combat anyway. There are plenty of games that have given us like a hunger or thirst system, or maybe even give us a few buffs for eating regularly or something like this, but otherwise it's just cluster that you end up looting, putting into your inventory, and maybe you'll sell it someday. The only thing I'm going to say about the main story is that we get a lot of control over it. I don't want to spoil any of it, because there is a lot of really cool stuff that happens as you're going through the game. But if you played Fallout 3, think about Megaton, and that is the level of choice that you have as you progress the game. So when I say this game is open to multiple playthroughs, provided you enjoy the gameplay loop of the game, which is pretty good, you can definitely have a lot of fun with your time. That brings us to the conclusion, where I have to decide whether or not I would recommend this game to people and how much I would recommend it. Ultimately, yes, I think this is a good game. This game is probably not a must play for everybody, but it is definitely a good game, and if you like this style of game, then you are definitely going to be having a good time.